Hello and welcome, stargazers. Welcome to another episode of the Outlaw Astrology podcast. This is episode 154, and today's topic is going to be revisiting the Fool, the Magician, and the High Priestess through a critical contemporary lens. And so, we're examining the Golden Dawn assignments and exploring alternatives and creating a personal correspondence list that honors both the tradition and the evolution. But before we get to that, a little housekeeping. This is a series, so you have to be familiar with the Golden Dawn basics covered in previous episodes, so have a look at that. And it invites you to become an intellectual outlaw mystic, someone who respects lineage but refuses dogma. Also, there is a free and paid newsletter called the Daily Stargazer, and you can find these episodes there for free in case you're of the mind to read things rather than just listen. And we are available on social media, so you're going to find us on Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. Links in the show notes, so all of these links will all be in the show notes. Thank you very much for tuning in, and now... one last thing. If you can share, like, and give us reviews, 5 stars is cool. That helps it others who are astro-curious find us as well. And now, onward. Alrighty, so let's get it started. We're going to start talking about the Fool. And the number that corresponds to that is 0. And by the way, 0 is not actually a number, it's a cipher, it's a placeholder number. Comes from originally from India, because the people from India were the ones who introduced this number into the lexicon as a placeholder, which is why we now have it. Now, traditionally, the Fool has correspondences to air, Uranus, or limitless potential. And so the Golden Dawn assignment is the Fool equals air, and Aleph, breath, life force, and those are the Kabbalistic associations, and it's often associated with Uranus in modern decks. So the question of this correspondence is, does air truly capture the Fool's boundless pre-elemental quality, and does assigning it any other element limit the card that represents all the possibility before manifestation, which would be the Magician? And so let's explore some alternatives. Uranus, and that would be sudden awakening, radical freedom, and innovation. Another alternative would be Neptune, dissolution of boundaries, divine madness, and the void. And Saturn, Earth, which would be stability, practicality, and a single point focus, or no planetary assignment at all. The Fool is pure 0-point consciousness. Okay? So, I encourage personal exploration. What planet or concept best reflects your experience of the Fool? Consider your own lived experience and moments when you might have labeled yourself, or someone else did, as foolish or naive or impulsive. Were they more of an airy and intellectual feel, Uranian and disruptive, falling to Earth via Saturn energy, or something else entirely? Now, for the record, I assigned Saturn and Earth energy to this card. Why? Because we're coming from nothing into something. So it is a falling to Earth connecting metaphor, which I've seen in films and I've seen in stories, and so that most resonates with me, which is why I choose to use it. But that just because I do so doesn't mean that you have to. We're teaching, the whole point here is critical thought, and to choose what makes sense to your lived experience. Know that you are the only authority here when it comes to what you want to assign, what planets, what signs, what elements, keeping in mind that there are 4 basic categories that can be used for the major arcana, and in fact the entire tarot structure. Elements: fire, earth, air, water. Planets: Sun through Saturn or Sun through Pluto, depending on the lineage, and the signs, Aries all the way out to Pisces. These are the three buckets that you can put everything into. Okay, so this is just a start. This is just where you want to begin. You can experiment, but your lived experience is the important key here, as is your own authority. You don't have to look to me or to look at any of these tarot books to decide what's right for you. If what's in the tarot book, which is the Common Golden Dawn Associations, works for you, then you're done. You don't have to do anything else, but feel free to listen in, because you might want to make a few revisions as you listen. And so we're going to move on to the Magician, Mercury, or something more sovereign. Okay, so the Golden Dawn assignment is Magician equals Mercury. That's communication, skill, the trickster archetype, the messenger archetype, and also duality. Now, it can be a good fit. Absolutely. Mercury as a conduit, a translator between worlds, a master of symbols and language. Mercury does capture this beautifully. Absolutely, I get it. This is an assessment and a correspondence that I feel works, but I'm also curious about exploring further. I don't want to accept it just because it's fine, or because I understand it, or because I get it, because I understand nervous systems. Nervous systems tend to love confirmation, certainty. That means saying, oh yeah, once I find something that agrees with the way I see the world, thumbs up. All the dopamine just rushing through the system. Everybody's nervous system is like this. I want to make certain that I'm doing my due diligence, that I am not just making a choice because it's easy or because it makes my nervous system happy because it has certainty in one aspect of my life. I want my nervous system to be comfortable with engaging with discomfort, which is what questioning naturally does. So let's complicate this. Is the Magician merely a messenger? Or is this card about self-sovereignty, will, the power to create reality? Does Mercury's mutable, dual nature diminish the Magician's focused initiating force? Now, these are only questions. These are questions that start the discourse. They are not the end of the road. If you come up with more questions whilst listening or whilst working with the material, jot those down and feel free to answer them as well. The point of the questions isn't for me to answer for you. It's for you to listen to these questions and think, okay, let me think about sovereignty. Do I understand it? Complication can feel uncomfortable, and I do encourage it, because creativity, thinking, all requires a little bit of tension, a little bit of discomfort in order to grow and to learn and to create. Okay, so let's look at a few alternatives here, okay? So the Sun, conscious will, creative power, and self-actualization. Mars is directed action, will and motion. It's also desire, how one asserts oneself, and also self-determination. And so what about the element of water? So, as I said, we looked at the Sun. Sun's possible for the Magician card. Why? Because of conscious will, creative power, self-actualization. That's what the Sun actually stands for. Mars is directed action and will and motion. So, instead of just being a thinker who's planning or has resources, Mars is directing that energy into action. Which is a beautiful thing. Or let's look at the elements of water. Well, we got this Mercury and it's all mental, but what about emotions? Here's the curious thing about emotions. We've all been taught to think by putting them aside. We're taught to be logical, we're taught to be reasonable, we're taught to be rational, and we all believed and continue to believe that thinking must be clear-headed, meaning no emotions involved. Now, there have been studies done on people who don't have that emotional component as activated due to illness, injury, or, etc. And what that means is we've gotten it all wrong. We make better decisions when emotions are present and we take them into account in our decision making. And how does this stack up with the topic at hand? Well, the element of water is emotion, relationships. And so with the element of water, the magician is now marrying all that conscious will and thought to a feeling. And that feeling will determine whether or not it's going to be this action or that action or neither, and some third or fourth thing entirely. Or we could stay with Mercury and emphasize the Hermes Trismegistus, that's alchemy, gnosis, as above, so below, rather than the trickster aspect. Now, the trickster aspect is a carryover from the Marseille Tarot deck, which it differs from the Rider-Waite-Smith, which is what we're talking about, by the fact that Rider-Waite-Smith is fully illustrated from card 0 all the way to card 78, which is in the Minor Arcana. And Marseille has fully illustrated Major Arcana, 0 through 22, that's the Major Arcana, but all the other cards, Minor Arcana, are all pips, meaning it's just going to show you a wand, or a sword, or a pentacle, or a cup, but in the number of the cards. So if we're looking at 2 of swords, we're going to see 2 swords. So if we're looking at 5 of pentacles, it's going to be 5 pentacles. And if we are looking at the 10 of cups, we're going to see 10 cups, and that is it. And we're going to have to use numerology and what we understand as the Major Arcana to make sense of the Minor Arcana. Okay? I hope that's clear. And so we could stay with Mercury and emphasize Hermes Trismegistus. Now, by the way, Hermes Trismegistus was not Hermes per se. It is what the Greeks called Thoth. You'll see that represented, written out as Thoth. It's pronounced Thoth or Thoth, but not Thoth. Although I've pronounced it Thoth for years because I am not from Kamut, which is what Egypt was called. Egypt is the name what the Greeks called Kamut, not what the Comedians called it. So there are no such things as ancient Egyptians. It's just what we call them to make sense of it so that everybody knows what we're talking about. But to get back to the topic, that's what Hermes Trismegistus refers to. The Greeks thought that Thoth, the Comedian god or Egyptian god, which is the Egyptian counterpart for Hermes, their version of that god, they found the Egyptian counterpart to be way better than their own Greek counterpart, Hermes, hence the name Hermes Thrice Great. We can still use that, and you can, if you still feel that Mercury best speaks to that energy, then continue to use it. Considering this, though, the magician in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition is not a trickster. He is Hermes Trismegistus. That's alchemy, gnosis, and as above, so below. That is not the trickster aspect. That's a totally different card deck. It's important that we denote clarity when possible and be precise in our interpretations and our labeling. So, can be kept. Now, my choice? I choose water. Why? Because I am learning to use my emotions and feelings in my decision-making, and so I feel this best helps me with my spiritual and mystical practices as they go on the daily. But your choice might be similar to mine or exactly like mine or entirely different. So, let's invite a little experimentation into this game. So, I would suggest working with the magician as with the sun as its corresponding planetary assignment. So, do that for an entire lunar cycle. That'd be about 28 to 29.5 days. And how does it feel when you read with it? So when you're sitting with the card and you visualize the solar force, meaning instead of it being Mercury, the card is associated with the sun. How does it feel? How do you feel? Does your lived experience back up this experience? So as the reading has happened, do you have lived experiences? Do you have experiences where the sun makes sense as this card's astrological correspondence? Remember, the sun is conscious will, creative power, and self-actualization. Or we could also do Mars for a lunar cycle, or practically any planet. Me, I'm working with water, as I've said, so I can get better with emotions and feelings when it comes to decision making and choice making. But everyone is different. I invite dissent, so long as it comes with solutions, as should we all. And so, experiment. If you hear what you heard you liked, use it. However, if you're like, well, what about Venus? What about Jupiter? Then explore those options as well. Do that for a lunar cycle and check your lived experience. Have I experienced the mage as expansive like Jupiter? Is it value-oriented like Venus? Is it more grounded like Saturn, meaning dealing with one's edges, building resilience, and having experiences that push one toward maturity, because limitations are great for creativity, and it also is helpful in the maturation experience. And as we mature as mystics, outlaw mystics, meaning we're thinking for ourselves and determining for ourselves, Saturn might be a good choice to act as guide through the mage experience. Mage, also magician experience, okay? So those are also options. Now, let us move on to the high priestess. And so we're thinking the moon, or the dark mother of all knowing. Now, typically the moon, you're going to see the assignment as the high priestess equals the moon. Traditionally, initiation, mystery, hidden knowledge, emotional tides, and the subconscious. This is why you'll see the high priestess sitting between two pillars with a J and a B. That will be from the Kabbalah. These are ceremonial mages, remember. And that is duality. She's sitting in front of the duality rather than next to it, because next, in between it, suggests a choice, meaning that you're going to act as a middle way between the two, or you're going to have to make a choice. She sits slightly in front of it, and behind them you'll see sometimes the moon or water, which gives that connection back to the moon. And she'll sometimes also have the moon directly beneath one foot, and there'll be a book in her lap at which she'll be pointing. And so you can see all that, the intuition, the mystery, the hidden knowledge. That would be the book. The emotional ties, that's the moon. The subconscious, also the moon. And so it can resonate, absolutely. The moon's connection to the high priestess feels deeply right for many readers. She's the keeper of cycles, the keeper of secrets, the keeper of what is hidden. She's the guardian of the unconscious. She is the luminous dark. That is such a beautiful collection of words, the luminous dark. Gorgeous. So, let's push a little further. Is the moon too mutable, too externally reflective for a card representing inner authority? And gnosis. Does the high priestess deserve a darker, more sovereign assignment? Let's explore alternatives. So, it could be Mars. Because, having all that lovely information in there is useful. It's lovely to have it there, but I like my information to be working for me, so Mars would be a good suggestion. Black Moon Lilith, that's the wild, untamed feminine. It's refusal to submit, hidden power. Now, Black Moon Lilith is not a planet. It is a hypothetical point, and I would say a calculation point, of the furthest distance in space from the moon. So that's far. That would be the furthest space, and therefore the most outsider part of us, because this is the distance of around the ecliptic, the furthest distance between the moon and in the ecliptic. So not really, it's a point, not a planet. And Pluto, underworld wisdom, occult knowledge, death and rebirth mysteries, or Neptune, mystical dissolution, spiritual intuition, the veil between worlds. Now, this all sounds really, really juicy. Really, really juicy. I don't care for the Black Moon Lilith assignment. I think it's really sexy to talk about, because I really like working with Black Moon Lilith, but I don't tend to use hypothetical points in my associations when I'm using astrology and tarot. So for me, I would not use that. But if anyone hears it and it resonates, go for it. Knock yourselves out. It's your practice you're building, and it should be built on your lived experiences and what resonates most with you. I like Pluto. I find that a really juicy thing to step into and explore. I'm not as mad about the Neptune for myself personally, but I understand. Yet I understand Neptune as an idea. I like the idea. I just don't see it working for me in practice. But if it turns any one of you on, do it. Explore it. Do it for a moon cycle and see how it turns out. Now, for me, I am using Mars because I want my knowledge to work. I don't want to just have stuff that sits in a dusty old library in my head and does nothing. I want to put it into action. And so Mars, for me, feels useful. And Mars can also be a kind of a dark energy. And here's why. Because Mars traditionally was the ruler of Scorpio, and still is if you practice traditional astrology or you use those sacred seven as the planetary energies you work with, excluding the outers, except when you're using them in transit. If this is you, then the Mars thing works. And I could see that as depth. I could see that as wild. I could see it as the hidden power. I could see it as occult knowledge, the underworld, because that's very Plutonian, death and rebirth mysteries, etc. I could definitely see that. And so that's why I have chosen Mars, because Mars is also in action. By the way, I use modern rulerships, but the association that Mars had to Scorpio, because Mars was a night planet, Scorpio is a night sign, kind of informed my choices in addition to my lived experience. My practice is, can I use this? Can I integrate it with action and experimentation and exploring in my life? If I can't, it's not very much use to me. When I was younger, I would be thrilled to have all the information. Now I want it to be doing something. I want to do something with it. So that's why I've chosen Mars as my alternative. Not set in stone yet. None of them are. I'm still playing around and probably will continue to do so. But these feel right because my brain can actually remember them. And when my brain can't remember something, that's a sign that I need to keep refining, keep working on it until I find the right connections, the right energies, because that's how my brain tends to work. If my brain cannot recall something, that's a trigger point right there that tells me I need to look deeper, that my work is not yet done. We haven't moved to a point where I can say I feel I've reached a state of completion, because completion is something I have to choose. Otherwise, I will just keep on going and going and going. So let's discuss the political dimension. So if we update the High Priestess correspondences to correspondences, we can claim about spiritual authority. We can reclaim it from feminine, spiritual, and mystical authority from passive, reflective associations, which I am all for. She is just not the moon's meta, but also the source of her own knowing, which I like. I like the idea of all of the femme so-called femme cards in the tarot being reclaimed from this passive, reflective, and subjective association into something more powerful. Someone who is the source of their knowing and the author as well, the possessor as well. So that, I'm all for that, absolutely. So how can we create our own correspondences? And by that, I say that to you. How can you create your own? And it's going to be a simple, practical method. It's only got 4 steps, because who can remember more than that? So step 1, you sit with the card, you meditate, you journal, you pull it repeatedly. You notice what planet, what sign or archetype keeps appearing in your intuition, or what synchronicities you encounter. Step 2, you research alternatives. So you're going to look beyond the Golden Dawn to other systems like the Marseille, Tote, modern psychological tarot, astrology, fixed stars, and you see what happens. See, I've only mentioned planets, but you're perfectly welcome to say, hey, what about fixed stars? Hey, what about asteroids? What about that stuff? If that is an interest, step into it. Absolutely step into it. Step 3, test in practice. That means use your experimental correspondences and readings for about 1 to 3 lunar cycles if you like. If one lunar cycle, if you're a faster moving type energy, 1 lunar cycle is probably going to be it. That's about 28 days to 29.5. If you want to have a longer practice, you may go for 3, which is basically about 3 months or so. You can go as long or as short as you like. I'd say definitely do 1 lunar cycle. That's enough information right there to decide if something's right or wrong. Either way. And what you're going to do is notice if it deepens interpretation. Does it clarify timing? Does it feel more alive than the traditional assessment? What we're looking for is interest, curiosity, something that makes you feel alive, engaged. If what you feel with the card is womp womp, then your search must continue, because womp womp is not what we're going here, or meh is not what we're going here either. It wakes you up, it engages you, it makes you want to think about it, engage with it. If none of that is happening, you're not even interested, you're not curious, you have no questions, next is what we're going to say to that. So, step 4, document your system. So write down your personal correspondences, your reasoning, your lived experiences with them, and this can become your grimoire, your living tarot astrology Bible. And so here's what we're doing here. This is not about discarding tradition, okay? It's about engaging with it critically, respectfully, mindfully, and courageously, because the best occultics are always heretics. Okay? So, there's only 4 steps. Step 1, you're going to sit with the card. If you need to meditate, journal, pull it repeatedly. Notice what planets, signs, archetypes, etc. are speaking to you. Step 2, research alternatives. You can look beyond the Golden Dawn. I would look in Marseille, look in Tote, look in modern psychological astrology, look at asteroid astrology, fixed stars, look at psychological tarot, and see what happens and see what resonates. Test in practice for about 1 to 3 moon cycles, and notice if it deepens the interpretation, clarifies the timing, makes one feel more alive. Step 4, document the system. That means you write down your correspondences, your reasoning, your lived experience, and that can become your grimoire. Because we're looking for a living grimoire, not something that's a dusty old tome that gets put somewhere then never engaged with again, okay? And so once again, we're not trying to discard tradition, we're engaging with it. We're doing so critically, mindfully, respectfully, and courageously. Okay? Alrighty, so key points to consider. The Golden Dawn has given us a really good foundation, but it's not a final answer. Our tarot practice, yours and mine, becomes more truly powerful when we think for ourselves, when we question authority and build correspondences from lived experiences rather than inherited doctrine. Okay, and so choose one of these 3 cards, the Fool, the Magician, or the High Priestess, and spend this week working with an alternative correspondence, and notice what shifts in your readings, what shifts in your intuition, what shifts in your relationship to the card. Do you feel more resonant, alive? That is an indication that you have a good correspondence. If not, and it's just meh, your search continues. Alrighty, and so the next episode is episode 155, in which we discuss the Empress, the Emperor, and the Hierophant. And we're about reclaiming sovereignty, questioning patriarchy, and reimagining authority through contemporary astrological correspondences. So, thank you very much for tuning in here. Once again, you can find us on YouTube, Pinterest, and Instagram. You'll find those links in the show notes. We have a free and paid newsletter. This part of the series is free, so you can go read it if you are of a mind to read. And as always, please like, share, subscribe, and review, because it helps others find us. So thank you very much. Peace and Astro Magic Star people.